Like I said yesterday, our boss and the big, smart, big-headed one, Rutendo Matinyarare, is sitting here in studio with me live from South Africa. And today we are going to have another perspective, like contrary to what we've been talking about. So we want to get deeper and deeper into our Afro consciousness and find out um, leadership between the old and the young. Topic today, like I posted, is like, are young Africans who are aspiring to take over the leadership of Africa aware of the challenges that are waiting them? Are they aware? Are they Afro-conscious enough to know the shoes they want to wear? And then on the contrary, we also want to get our guest opinion or some lectures or some information about the leadership that we have on the continent. Some people also, and some critics have been saying, it's not really just a matter of staying in power, but it is the ability to be able to steer that country. But of course, we've been hearing about unemployment, the situation in Zimbabwe and East Africa, or even Nigeria that we were cracking on yesterday is not getting any better. But what are the leaders that we think have been on the leadership positions doing about it? Yesterday, we talked about the Fulani and the Yoruba subsequent outburst of a conflict out there. And then we've been talking about the situation in Uganda, as we all know. We also have been talking about the fact that, you know, this leadership on the continent is too old and long lasting and no one wants to shift. So I'm very happy that today, sitting with me in studio, Rutendo is here to give us another perspective and to educate us on what we should know. And then we begin to gain consciousness in the aspect of, are we really, how our young leaders that are aspiring prepared? Or if not, the ones that would be or have made some mistakes, it's time for us to jot down these things and work on them. Because as we all know, the leadership on the continent is not really favorable if we're still going to be promoting and working with, you know, with all these Western partners that are actually not fair and that have always that are just like using Africa like they're like a gold mine. They keep digging and digging. We look at Central African Republic; it's the poorest, despite the mineral resources. We're talking about Democratic Republic of Congo. We're even talking about the U.S. sanctions on Zimbabwe that has crippled that economy, and many others. We're talking about Cameroon. We're talking about Nigeria. We're talking about the entire continent. But irrespective of that, I got a question today that a brother called and like, yeah, Susan, and you guys keep talking about the diaspora has to go home. I think Rutendo is the right person also to give us those perspective. Like, we don't really trust it. Do you want us to come and really help in the leadership, or is it just a question of we must come back home? You know, these are all questions that when the diaspora start picking, and now that we're promoting and actually exposing the news to the continent that no other media will do it, they begin to get a feeling of the reality on the ground. So the question is the diaspora afraid, or they now, the information that we're giving regarding the continent kind of like frighten them, like, oh, I might be running from a frying pan and jumping into fire? No, that is not the point. The point that we want us Africans to be conscious is no matter where we are as a black man, it's a problem. So in as much as Africa, Rutendo says it always better. If Uganda, if Zimbabwe is not stable, Africa is shaky. Nigerians say the same thing, Democratic Republic of Congo, and everywhere. So where do we start? Where we're ending. But it's really nice to know this leadership is aging. Now, the ones that are ready or aspiring to take over, do they get the capacity? If not, what should they do now? Welcome to studio, Rutendo. It's been a long while. I miss you, bro.
Yes, I miss you too, Annie. How are you doing?
As you can see, you know, I'm not really doing pretty well, because when I look at the whole situation now, you know, you think as if you're moving forward, but there's still something that is pulling us behind. Like, are we really going to make it? How do you feel about that, Rutendo? I mean, overall.
I don't know. I've got mixed feelings. First of all, I want to know, can you hear me?
Yes.
And do you hear me loud and clear?
Very loud and clear. And you have even
Okay.
some very good echoes behind your studio there. I think your studio should be a very perfect one. It's just good.
Yeah, I'm in a room with the double ceiling, so that's why the echo. But anyway, I've got mixed feelings, Annie, because Africa is at a crossroads where we are not too sure which way we are going to go as a continent because of the new world order that is coming into effect, because of AI that is coming into effect. And my worry is that a lot of Africans just want to go with the trend. A lot of African leaders just want to go with the wind and go where every other country in the world is going. But my issue is, if they go with the wind, if they go with AI, 4IR, without taking time to take stock, they're going to discover that the nation state is going to become obsolete in the next 5 years or so. And AI is going to take over. The singularity is going to take over. It's going to make national currencies obsolete. It's going to make nations obsolete. And it's going to make African leaderships and African political parties redundant. And so I would like our leaders, who many people say love power, to seriously consider what it is that they want. Do they want to be colonized by the technology that is coming? Do they want their nations to become obsolete as we become a one world government system, a globalized nation, a new world order in which they no longer have relevance, our nations no longer have relevance, our currencies no longer have relevance because we're going to be using cryptocurrency? So I think a discussion needs to take place in Africa. And when I've heard that discussion taking place in the AU and other fora, they just want to go with this trend of 4IR, even though Africa is not manufacturing anything, producing anything, or creating the technologies that are going to be required in the 4IR. So I wonder if African leaders even have an idea or a clue of what it is that is coming. Because once they realize that they're going to lose power, once they realize that our currencies are not going to have any value, when they realize that every single thing in the world is going to be inventoried and put onto the blockchain system and owned by somebody, maybe they'll start to take the changes that are coming seriously and start making decisions that are going to be in the best interest of Africa and not the interest of our enemies.
Rutendo, that sounds, I think if someone will hear that, or if they're listening, it sounds like some rocket science out there. I mean, because if you talk like, look at the pandemic, it's not even something that we're saying is coming. It's already there. What did they do to put, just even now, it's a year, and we haven't heard anything like these are measures that we are in a laboratory trying to research something COVID organic from Madagascar or nothing. It's just like we fold our arms and wait.
Yeah, and it's a trend that we always see on the African continent, is that we are never proactive in trying to come up with solutions to problems that are currently there and future problems, because we do not have any scenario planning. So you will look at Africa, we usually give credence to people that have got certain qualifications, doctors, accountants, mathematicians, lawyers. And those studies are relevant for certain things, but they're not relevant for nation building. They're relevant for maintaining a nation, but not building a nation. And these are the kind of situations that we find ourselves where we've got lawyers that are equipped to dispense European jurisprudence. We've got doctors that are equipped to dispense a medical craft or a dark arts of Hippocratic medicine, or what they call hematic medicine. And we've totally forgotten about African traditional medicine. We've forgotten about African traditional laws. And so what we continue to do on the African continent is we continue to reproduce colonial results, because we're using the colonial system to manage our economies. We use economics. We've got economists, and economists are trained to manage the distribution of resources for the benefit of Western nations and for the benefit of the capitalist system, which is built on primitive accumulation that takes resources from the majority, takes resources from the masses, and puts them into the hands of a few people. What our economists in Africa have not yet understood is that the few people to which the resources are going to be distributed to are not black people, but they're actually the elite of the white nations that have brought imperialism upon the world, used colonialism to take land away from natives, take resources and the right to those resources away from natives. And with that, they've been able to build the knowledge system that they're using to colonize the world, and a banking system that looks at paper money, which the Europeans are rich in, and then devaluation of our resources, which the Europeans buy with their useless paper money, and then they use our resources to give value to their paper money. Our economists haven't understood this. And so we are always reacting to what it is that the Europeans are doing instead of looking for ways to come up with solutions to the problems. So you look at hermetic medicine, as I was saying, or let's call it allopathic medicine, which is Western medicine. It's the snake on a stick or snake on a rod medicine, which is a form of witchcraft, but that's for another day. And it looks at using chemicals in an alkaline body to bring treatment to an alkaline body with chemicals or with acids, which is totally opposed to how it is that the body is supposed to be maintained and given healing. An alkaline body needs alkaline solutions to be able to heal it. But the Western system gives us acids and chemicals to put into our bodies so that we can supposedly heal our sickness. And in reality, they just simply manage sickness, sometimes cause even more sickness. And that's why you'll see that in the United States, the biggest killer of Americans is the medical industry. It is overdoses from medication. It is side effects of medication. It is accidents that are made by medical practitioners. And these are the things that actually cause the death, to the extent that 52% of Americans are on chronic medication. But our doctors in Africa want to assimilate into this system of medications and allopathic medication and ignoring homeopathy, diet, and all the other important elements that actually cause people to get sick or to be diseased in the first place. So now when we look at this COVID situation, we needed doctors that are going to have a different outlook to this sickness, not just looking at throwing medications or throwing surgery towards a problem like what allopathic medicine does, but we needed something that is going to look at the holistic system and try and see how it can give treatment to the problem. So from food, our environment, from our environment, trying to ensure that people eat healthier foods that lift their immunity, because what we understand is a lot of diseases in the world right now are being driven by a destruction of our immunity because of bad food, pollution in the environment, radiation, and so many other things. And in the Western system, they're never going to try and find out what is causing the sickness, because allopathy, as it was created by the Rockefeller industry of companies that wanted to use their petrochemicals that came from the oil reserves that they had as a company, they only looked for solutions that look to administer and prescribe medications in order to sell more petrochemicals. And so what we are saying is that Africans must now say that system is not about healing people, but it's about making money for those who've got the money. So just like in agriculture, we talk about how it is, agriculture has got to stop being about chemicals in the soil, but now maintaining the health of the soil, having quality seeds, having seeds that can reproduce, having farmers go back to improving the quality of the seeds. We need a medical system and medical practitioners that begin to do the same for the human body. A healthy body is more immune to disease. It has a much stronger immunity. It's actually able to fight invasions of the body much more effectively. And it's able to give a palliative solution to healing much more than this disease maintenance that we've got in the current medical system. And the current doctors that have been trained by the Western system to push drugs, to become drug dealers, which is what it is our doctors are. They're drug dealers for Western pharmaceutical companies. Doctors in Africa don't even have labs. They don't even research. They're not even trying to come up with solutions. And the country that has got these labs to experiment is the country that is actually now creating more diseases, new strains, and giving them to the rest of the continent. Because again, it is controlled by white people that only think of one thing: making money, exploitation, and not healing, and not the well-being of the society.
It is sorry. Where do we start? I mean, if we come back to our topic of today, like Afro-consciousness and leadership between the young and the old, now we're seeing that even the leadership that has been in place hasn't got it. They don't get it. In this case, let's just say they're not seeing it coming, and they haven't seen it coming. And then now we're even taking even the young people. How prepared do you think they are? Do you think they get it?
I always say that the condition of your leaders is a reflection of the condition of your society. So if you always read European literature, their societies were built by, I mean, the leadership of their countries was built by their societies. So you always hear them talking about intellectuals, artists, academics, professionals as the contributors, business people, entrepreneurs, researchers, as the contributors to the knowledge pool that is utilized to write the white papers, the blue papers, the green papers that are then utilized to influence policy. So in Africa, we've got a deficit of intellectualism, a deficit of ideas, a deficit of contributions of solutions, because we have got a society of people that look to government for everything. We've got a society of people, particularly the young people, who think that government must do everything for them. And even though the old folks or the old leaders are not able to give us all the solutions we need today, it is because they are not getting any motivation or getting any input or any energization from the society of the youth. Now, let me tell you why I'm saying this. These old people that everybody demonizes today were living in a time where they were under colonial governments. Under these colonial governments, they were colonized, they were oppressed, they did not have happiness. And instead of them sitting to look to the government of their oppressor for a solution, these guys created grassroots leadership in order to start fighting for their freedom. And this started from the first day that the European got onto the African continent. People started fighting. Our elders started rising up and saying, this here stranger is not here for a good reason. We need to fight. They died fighting. And after them, our other elders began to live through this colonialism. And it was not because the fight was taken out of them. They didn't feel that they were prepared to fight again. They could gauge that we're not yet ready. And then when we start getting into the 1940s, they are forced to go to the Second World War. They are forced to fight with guns. They are taught to understand how the white man thinks. All of a sudden, when they come back from the Second World War, they have this push to seek African independence, because they understood that when they went to Europe, they were going to fight for the independence of Europe, which was being oppressed supposedly by the Germans, and Asia that was being suppressed allegedly by the Japanese. And when they got home, these, our parents, these elders that everybody tries to make sound as if they are they are some stupid creature that doesn't know how to manage nations, organize themselves. They organize themselves all across the continent without the internet. They organize themselves all across the continent without the modern communication technology that allowed them to communicate with ease. They were communicating with pieces of paper. They were reading what was being said by Malcolm X, what was being said by Dr. Martin Luther King in the United States through newspaper cuttings and newspaper articles. They organized themselves with Pan-African organizations. They read books that were written by people like Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and began to organize themselves to undertake guerrilla warfare. They understood the books that had been written by people like Che Guevara, teaching them about guerrilla warfare. They read about Dien Bien Phu in Vietnam to understand how it is that the French were overthrown, and that way that the French were overthrown is how they could organize themselves to overthrow these leaders or their governments that were not giving them what they want. And these men, ill-equipped, a lot of them uneducated, without exposure given to them by the internet or Discovery Channel, they were able to get a conceptualization of the world, organize themselves, take the little resources they had and begin to petition other nations for weapons, or petition other nations for food. They created logistics lines to undertake wars. They fed themselves in the bush without aeroplanes, without tanks, without trucks. And they carried out successful rebellions and wars and defeated the white man from Algeria to Madagascar to Zimbabwe. That's what our old leaders did. That's how politicized they were. That's how knowledgeable of the world they were. And that's how it is that they were so organized that they were able to defeat formal armies, formal logistics lines. They were able to undertake communication strategy, a logistics strategy, better than the Europeans had done. You look at a situation where in Zimbabwe, the war was not undertaken with only the Rhodesian forces. Kissinger and the European world decided that Rhodesia was not going to fall to black hands. Rhodesia was not going to be a country in which Europeans were going to be defeated at war by 16-year-olds who are sharing an AK-47 while wearing slippers. Kissinger created a document that was called NSSM 200, in which he communicated that white peoples being defeated on the African continent shall not be accepted because it will radicalize the African. But even under those odds, even though the United States allowed the ex-Vietnam soldiers to come from Vietnam to renounce their American military status so that they would become mercenaries, and they allowed 15,000 mercenaries to come from America and all over Europe into Rhodesia, into Zimbabwe, to fight our parents and stop these 16-year-olds from fighting for independence. Because I need to reiterate this, that the fighters that fought for Zimbabwean independence were 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 24-year-olds. These people who had never traveled on an aeroplane, people who came from a village, who organized themselves and orchestrated, or let us call it, they conspired to fight and defeat the European, creating relationships and social capital in Tanzania with people like Nyerere, people like Samora Machel in Mozambique. These young 16-year-olds, 40-year-olds were able to sit and negotiate with these guys to give them weapons, to ask the AU to support their struggle. They went all the way to Romania. They went all the way to China. They went all the way to Russia to receive training. These guys were on another level. And that's why I say that those leaders, when we now hear people undermining them today, is because they don't know how far those leaders came from, what they did, and the feats that they successfully undertook to give us our independence. And what they achieved at the ages that they achieved it is things that 40-year-olds of my generation cannot achieve today, when we can't even come together to say sanctions are warfare on a nation and we need to stand up against this nation. These are things my generation will never achieve, when a Bobby Wine is busy saying that the United States must come and sanction Museveni, and yet Museveni himself is financed and propped up by the United States government to be part of the force that destabilizes the Great Lakes region for the looting of American companies. It cannot be that this generation can achieve what it is that our fathers achieved, when a Julius Malema in South Africa is sitting in a parliament that is sitting on a Freemason lodge in South Africa, a parliament that is still controlled by Freemasons, a parliament that is still legalized apartheid with black faces, they will never be able to achieve that which was achieved by the older generation, which they undermine. And the reason they'll never achieve that is they are not as organized, they're not as passionate, they're not as driven, they're not as united. They do not share the Pan-Africanism that our forefathers and our fathers possessed, and they did not have meaning of purpose as our fathers do. Julius Malema, Bobby Wine, Chamisa in Zimbabwe are much more interested about fame. They're much more interested about being a president. They're much more interested about bling because they were raised by the MTV-based generation. They were raised by the most bankrupt people in the world, which are these African-American hip-hop artists that have been created by white society to damage the minds of black people all across the world with a toxic culture that is now called hip-hop culture, which many people try to say is African culture, that has been bastardized in order to keep black people blind, uninformed, stupid, and focused on the wrong things like consumerism.
It's not funny, so I'm not laughing because like it's funny. I'm just curious to get this other perspective that nobody would think about it, that everybody would look like a young leader like Bobby Wine. We've seen how, you know, during his campaigns and everything, and the young people are rising and saying, this is the kind of leadership that we want. We look in South Africa, we see Julius Malema, I mean, going out and mobilizing the young people, and young people are really looking out to these young leaders, or Chimaza in Zimbabwe as well. Do you think that young people just think, all right, these leaders understand our plight, and because, you know, they represent us in our generation, what the older generation definitely did not take along? Or do you just think they just need a change? I mean, it's been long. We want somebody else. If the person is going to be then we start dealing with the challenges.
I believe that a lot of these young leaders just feel they need to exist for the purpose of a generational relevance. So there is this saying that the old leaders are too old, they can't lead anymore, so we need young leaders. And then for this young leader to rise, we are using the westernized or the Westminster system of raising leadership, which is a popularity contest. So you look at the aspect that Julius Malema has become a leader of EFF because of the platform that he got from the ANC Youth League that groomed him and got him the attention of the media, which then publicized him. And from there, he then clashed with his leaders. And when he clashed with his leaders, he left. And he left with the intention of waiting for the ANC to see through his 5-year suspension. But somebody in the shadows, somebody among the wolves that are our enemies, reached out to him and said to him, start your own political party. Do your own thing. You have the chutzpah to become the next leader of South Africa. You can become the next president of South Africa, and we will finance you. And with that, Julius Malema, who had principled himself that I am going to wait for my suspension to end, and as a disciplined cadre of the ANC, I'm going to go back into the ANC. He was persuaded by money to leave that principle. He was persuaded by money to drop his ideology of waiting through his suspension, accepting the punishment that his elders and party were giving him, the party that raised him, the party that took him out of the dust. He threw all that away, and he was attracted by the money and his ego to become a leader. And the people who groomed him for this role had no intention of raising an African leader. They had no intention of raising a person that is going to be a counter-hegemony to the hegemony. They had the intention of creating a placeholder. a person who's going to hold and take up the space of revolution in South Africa, so that he could become a pressure release valve for the youth in South Africa who eventually are getting angry and want to uprise. And these smart, clever stewards from the Broederbond of South Africa and their Freemason cousins of Europe decided to say, if the youth are going to uprise, we need something to release the pressure when they are ready to burst. When they're ready for revolution, we need something to depress and take out the pressure so that they calm down again. And that was the birth of Julius Malema. And by him refusing to wait for his suspension to end so that he can go back to his mother body, he illustrated to these wolves, to these people in the Broederbond, that he had no principle and no ideology, but he was driven by ego and the love of power and money. And so that's when they then said, so you can be the pressure valve. Whenever the youth of South Africa are now saying we are enough, we're enough of not having jobs, we're enough of white people controlling 93% of the wealth of this country 25 years after independence, they decided that Malema will be that guy. When white people beat a black person, they'll go onto the street, they'll toy, and black people feel like something is happening. Malema is that guy who will tell them that one day we will take the land, and the youth will wait for Malema to tell them the time of the revolution, the day of the revolution. And by so doing, Malema becomes that pressure valve that gives these young people persistent hope until they become old men waiting for the day that Malema will tell them to go onto the street. And the European or these Broederbond members, these Freemasons, knew that that's how Malema was going to think. Then they began to give him the script. And while they were giving him the script, there were people like me and Joshua speaking in the public domain, saying that any African youth leader that is still thinking ethnocentrically about his little country and little borders, a Julius Malema that still thinks that politics is about South Africa, a Tafadzwa Mugwadi in Zimbabwe who still thinks that politics is about Zimbabwe, we said that they're going to become obsolete, because only a leader that can unite Africa becomes relevant. And his bosses heard him. They heard us. And they went to Julius and they said, Julius, you need to change your rhetoric. You need to stop worrying about being focused on South Africa again. Because if you talk about Pan-Africanism, you can actually begin to touch the hearts and minds of African youth and influence them and play the same role of occupying the position of revolutionary leader, so that those youth cannot revolt, or you can make them revolt when you choose to make those that we want to revolt. So if you've seen, Julius Malema has started being the mouthpiece that creates instability in countries like Zimbabwe. You speak against the leaders in Zimbabwe and foment revolution and revolt in Zimbabwe, but he's not doing it in South Africa, because the white leaders of this country, the true leaders of this country, don't want a revolution in this country, and they don't want a revolution that transforms the economy to give Africans control of their economy. But Julius can be used in Zimbabwe, where there is a revolutionary party that is bringing change, to try and remove a revolutionary government so that they can put a puppet government called MDC that will return resources back into white hands to create another South Africa. Julius Malema can be used to support Bobi Wine, so that Bobi Wine can overthrow a Museveni who's made sure that poverty has reduced in Uganda. A Museveni who's made sure that Uganda is in the top 5 fastest growing nations in Africa, because he's a revolutionary who he feels Bobi Wine should replace to bring a more pliant puppet to the West. And now you need to get me here. Museveni himself is a puppet to the West as well. But Museveni is a puppet that sometimes plays the right role. And I'll tell you a story. Zimbabwe was sent to Sudan by the UN. There were warlords that were wreaking havoc there. And those warlords that were wreaking havoc were about to divide the nation. So the United Nations asked for Zimbabwean troops to be sent there to defend the nation of Sudan and to avoid it from splitting and falling into the hands of these two warlords. Zimbabwean government went there. While this was happening, there was a negotiation between the United States government and these rebel forces. So while this operation was taking place, and at a time where the Zimbabwean army was going to dislodge these rebels, the United States government came back and said to the UN, cut the operation, stop funding the operation. So they gave instruction to the Zimbabwean army to say, the operation is done, can you go back? But the military objectives had not been reached. And because the military objectives had not been reached, Mugabe said, we cannot leave now. There are women, there are children who are being raped. There is still tyranny that is being caused by these warlords, so we cannot leave yet. So the UN stopped funding Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is already under sanctions. It's doing a UN job, and it feels that there's a humanitarian crisis. There are women and children that need to be saved from these warlords, so we can't leave. So they decide to stay, and the UN cuts off funding. Guess who came to the rescue? Museveni came to the rescue. He's the one who provided these Zimbabweans with food. He created a chain of young rebels who were walking from Uganda, carrying food, carrying bullets, carrying military equipment that Museveni was given by the United States government and the countries supporting Uganda. They supported the Zimbabwean army until it was able to deal with the crisis that was happening in Chad. So these are the kind of problems that you see happening. And these old leaders who are difficult for you to classify as devil or angel sometimes come together with those camaraderies of the past, camaraderies of the old leaders to do the right thing. So in this case, the Zimbabwean army could have been isolated in this country. And if it was isolated adequately, it could have been defeated. Because the Americans' objectives, which are not pro-African, were now being fulfilled by other means, and Zimbabwe was disturbing in the same way that Zimbabwe was seen as disturbing in Congo. So when you now have a Bobby Wine replacing Museveni, will he know how to play these roles? Just even though Museveni is a supporter of this imperialist system, there are times that he makes a decision that imperialism must fall at this particular stage. There's a time he makes a decision to say, even though Zimbabwe was standing against me in Congo, even though Zimbabwe was standing against me and Kagame in Congo, in this particular case, I feel that we must come together with my old compadre to serve the traditional values of African unity. Will Bobby Wine be able to do that? Does Julius Malema, who supports Bobby Wine, understand the background and the history of the leader that's already there, what he's achieved, and the type of attitude that he has towards the kind of Africa we are trying to build? When Julius Malema says he wants land for South Africans, and then he begins to support MDC in Zimbabwe, who are financed by white farmers, who are financed by the US government that's got sanctions on Zimbabwe to overthrow the Zimbabwean government in order for the MDC to come in and bring land back to whites. When he supports MDC, is Julius Malema not supporting the opposite of land reform in South Africa? These contradictions of these young leaders that are caused by the fact that they are being pulled on a string as puppets with no ideology. Being pulled on a string as puppets with no ideology because all they worry about is fame, money, Louis Vuitton, and living an excessive life of capitalism and consumerism that makes them an exploiter of their own people. Are they capable of taking this continent forward? Some gentleman from Kenya sent me an intelligence report in which they were talking about the institutions on the African continent that are destabilizing Africa. And this intelligence report was so unique in the aspect that we think it's the CIA and MI6 that destabilize Africa. But in this report, it actually came out that it is actually the French intelligence that is responsible for a lot of intelligence work and counter-revolutionary work on the African continent, and it is the handler of many of these young leaders that we see on the African continent, where they fund these African leaders from an institution that is called Vanguard and another one that is called Open Society, Open Society that belongs to Soros. And we understand that they are the funders of people like Julius, funders of people like Bobby Wine, and also funders of Nelson Chamisa in Zimbabwe. And they ask these young leaders to fight revolutionary movements in order to reverse decolonization on the African continent. So that's a worry. Do we have a future with such young leaders? Do we have a future with young leaders that have been raised by MTV base? Do we have a future with young leaders that have been raised by Jay-Z, that believe that Louis Vuitton and twerking are important parts of life? Can we depend on a leader that wears a belt for $2,000 US? And yet that belt is built off a base of the exploitation of the African people to build a capitalist system that is built on primitive accumulation of African resources for the conspicuous consumption of the elite at the top, who happen to be white, and their puppets that they use to destabilize Africans to stop them from controlling their own resources.
We'll take a break later. We are all learning, and we're listening, and we'll be taking questions shortly. But I like the perspective. This is the truth that we must speak about ourselves. Whether it's truth or it's fact or it's uncomfortable, I think it's really time that we begin to open out and take out the skeletons out of our cupboards and look at it from all angles. It might be right, it might not be right, but it's time for us to think of what actually we want in Africa and how we want it. How Afro-conscious are we enough to really bring meaningful change that works for Africans, that is in accordance with our values? Of course, Rutendo, would we ever have to work without having Western partners?
The West is an enemy to Africa because the West needs African resources for the West to remain viable and for them to maintain their civilization. And there is a book that was written.
Excuse me, I just want to pick on that before you go further. So, whose fault is it? I mean, like, when I look at from an egocentric purpose, like you're doing a kind of a business, we know that unfair business is not right. But you, on your part as an African that has to negotiate, business is being done on win-win, and you're always losing. So where should we work in? We already know the position of the West. Of course, they want to do business, they want to win, they want to be relevant in that. So we in another case, should we African expect that they would have to think for us, or we have to think to outperform or to create the balance?
Humanity is an ecosystem. So what we should learn is that human beings shouldn't be competing with each other. We shouldn't have divided ourselves into races and then start racing against each other to outdo each other. That's where the biggest problem in humanity started. We should be working together. We should be working symbiotically to be able to make good for humanity so that it can evolve and go into the future.
Correct.
The competition that we've created right now creates wars. Wars create arms races. Arms races create the creation of weapons and technologies that will bring us to extinction. And that is why I always say the European system is a death culture, and this death culture will bring us to extinction. And so the only way to stop going towards extinction, as we're doing right now, is for us to take some steps back and to start again what it is that humanity should have done before, which is to come together, to work together in an ecosystem of us as humans, together with our natural environment, for us to be able to prosper. Until and unless we do that, we're going into extinction. And I think our extinction is within the next 10 to 50 years with AI that is coming through. AI was created again.
Can you just break it down? AI. I mean, for the audience, I don't really know what is AI.
All right, so we are creating an era of artificial intelligence. As
Okay.
we get much more powerful computing power within our computers, our cell phones, that capacity of computing is being developed into what they're calling artificial intelligence, which is computer programs and softwares that are able to become intelligent, develop their own intelligence, increase their own intelligence that they begin to create. And in this case, they begin to create code. And that code is then able to create a virtual world that is now going to control humanity. A virtual world in which computers are able to take all legal documents that exist in the world, all legal judgments and case law that exists in the world, and be able to come up with a judgment for a case just by feeding in the what you call it, the facts of the case. It is going to be able to judge a case and come up with a result. It is going to be able to take a lot of jobs, accounting jobs, actuarial jobs, any of these complex task jobs that come with systems, processes, and methodologies will be done much quicker by a computer that is able to take the methodology and use artificial intelligence to be able to come up with a result. However, because this artificial intelligence learns from history, it learns from data, it is able to take the data that already exists online, learn from it, understand decisions that human beings made over one single issue, how many decisions different human beings made, and come up with the best way and the best decision to come up in a particular scenario. Over time, this intelligence becomes more intelligent than human beings. It begins to make decisions for human beings. It begins to drive human beings. It begins to be the pilot of aeroplanes. And it begins to drive because if human beings try to go on a road where 1 billion computers are driving, human beings will not be able to drive under that circumstance because cars will be moving faster, they have smaller gaps that are calculated by computers that don't make mistakes. The human being tries to put his car in there, he cannot react in time. So over time, that human being will not be able to drive on a road where computers are driving. Aeroplanes, the same thing. Trains, the same thing. Everything, including trading in the banking system, where computers are trading stocks and making 1/4 cent per every little transaction by just looking for small points of arbitrage, means that a human being no longer has the mind or the smartness to compete with these computers in trading stocks, so the human being becomes redundant. And it becomes like that with everything. Doctors, robotics are going to come in, they're going to do operations, they're going to diagnose sickness, they're going to do it 1,000,000 times better than human beings. The human doctor is going to become obsolete. A computer will be able to tell a disease before it even becomes a symptom to the person. It will be able to tell that a person's got a disease. So why wait for a doctor that only understands that you've got a cancer when you come with a pain? This is the era we're going. So once we get every job and everything replaced by computers, computers are running the world. And I've said to many people already before that already in the world that we live in, we're already being controlled by these computers, but we just don't know it. When you get into a brand new BMW now, it comes with a drive-by-wire system. That drive-by-wire system means that there is no physical component or mechanical component attaching the steering to the wheels, the brakes to the wheel, the brake pedal to the wheels, and indicators, anything else. So these cars are actually being driven by computers. So when you drive a drive-by-wire car, a BMW, and you hold the steering, you're not the one steering the car. You are holding a steering that gives a signal to the car that you want to turn left or right. And when you do that, then the car makes a decision to turn left because you turned your steering to the left. But if you are asking for permission from the computer or the computer box, and the car obliges, is it not clear that the car can also decide not to oblige? If cars are going to be driving themselves and you can hold the steering and drive, if the car feels that you're making mistakes and it can take control of you over, it means that the cars can do it already now. So that's a dangerous world in which we're living in. And now what I'm saying is that if we as Africans don't realize this, and if our leaders don't realize this, we are going to get into a world where governance of nations is going to be done by the very same computer systems with us sitting by. Decisions are going to be made for us. Our resources are going to be sold for us. Our resources which are going to be sitting on a blockchain will be sold because the computer believes that this African country needs toilets, highways, and railways much more than it needs anything else. So we must sell this platinum to the United States or to any other country or to this other company, and the Africans must have the highway. But the highway might not be a good strategic decision for our development. It might not be what we need. We might actually not need highways. We might actually need to save more before we get to building highways, but we're not going to have those rights to make those decisions. And we need young African leaders, including the elder African leaders, to understand that this is the world that we're going into. This is the threat of the AI that I'm talking about. This is the extinction that could come from the AI if Africans and the rest of the world do not abandon this Western culture, take a few steps back, and start to look at a collaboration of humanity, a symbiosis between human beings and nature, for us to build a world that we allow to develop ourselves for evolution, rather than for us to continue developing ourselves for extinction as we are doing now. The next thing that could cause extinction is war. There's enough nuclear weapons to destroy this earth 1,000 times over. China has got them. The United States has got them. Russia has got them. Europe has got them. Even Israel has got nuclear weapons. These nuclear weapons are not going to build a happier nation. And with the scarcity of resources increasing, fresh water is running out. Mineral resources are running out. Nations are going to fight for resources. Germany, which is a colony of the United States, right now is beginning to have problems with the United States, telling it which people it can trade with and which it can't, which you're already seeing with the issue of the oil pipeline or the gas pipeline that's being developed between Russia and Germany. The United States is saying, if you continue to develop this gas pipeline, if you continue to use your contractors to work on a gas pipeline with an enemy of NATO, which is Russia, we're going to put you under sanctions. The Germans are saying, United States, you can't put us under sanctions because that's extraterritorial imposition of US law. You can't tell us who to trade because that's, you know, that is contravening our sovereignty, which the United Nations Charter clearly protects. That will lead us into wars, and those wars will be nuclear wars. They will destroy humanity, they will destroy and condemn Earth, because once nuclear weapons are used, that land is condemned for the next 50 to 100,000 years. Then we come to scarcity. All resources are being depleted by this system because we are building things for them to be replaced. So we continue to make things, we continue to exploit very non-renewable resources to create products that are not meant to last, that are meant to be replaced every 2 days, every 3 days, every 5 years, every 10 years. So eventually we're going to deplete resources, and when those resources are depleted, we are not going to be able to have any more. And the pollution caused by these resources that we've been exploiting, especially petrochemicals and plastics, are going into our food systems. Little particles of plastic are going into the fish, into the prawns. We're eating that fish and the prawns. It's giving us diseases, it's giving us cancers, and we're getting sicker. And as we get sicker, the pharmaceutical company makes more chemicals to toxify our bodies even more. So we can't continue with that path. We can't continue with the westernized way of development. So we can close out the West, if only to close out their culture, because it is a dead culture, and face inside here in Africa, where we begin to say, how do we begin to build humanity with consideration of our ecosystem, which includes the human beings and the relationship to God as human beings and nature? How do we stop polluting our water, our soils, our air, so that we can live? How do we ensure that our food is healthy so we can give our bodies immunity? We have to go back there and eliminate the European way. So we can do without Europeans. We can trade as Africans without this toxic culture. And I agree that this toxic culture will always invade us. It will always force itself upon us. But we have to start shutting ourselves off first while learning how to be able to protect ourselves from it. There's a guy that once said to me, I was having an argument with him before I became woke. And I said to him, but we Africans are stupid. We've never manufactured anything. We've never created anything. We don't even produce the things that we use. And then he said to me, has it ever occurred to you that we might not have needed cars because as Africans, we already had learned how to teleport? Do you realize that we might not need a cell phone? We might not need the internet. And the internet is not an invention in a world where people communicate telepathically. And Africans have missed the opportunity to become the best of what they could have become, which would not have needed physical things because our development was short-circuited by this death culture and this virus of humanity that is called the West. And all of a sudden we left behind teleportation, the way that we levitated those big boulders that built the pyramids, which no one can explain how they were moved. No one can explain how they were cut. You go to Zimbabwe, there's the great Zimbabwe city there, made of stone, cut to perfection, laid on top of each other without any cement. No one can explain, no one explain what cut it. It is because there are chances that as Africans, we didn't use physical instruments to cut. We used instruments from other dimensions and other means that science has not discovered, science has not explored, because science only looks at what can be seen, what can be measured, what can be objectified. We are different people. And that's why we have to go back. So I believe Africa must go back, to answer your question. And when we do go back, we don't have to believe that we need the West. I don't need this cell phone if I can teleport, sorry. I don't need this cell phone if I can telepathically communicate. I don't need this cell phone if as a community of people we're a hive mind. Our minds are interconnected to each other, which is what they're now trying to do with the internet, which is what they're now trying to do with the Internet of Things. But they're trying to do it physically because the European is physical in nature, physical indeed, even though behind the scenes he also works with the unseen and the metaphysical.
Wow, that was hot. We are 1 hour into the show, and we'll be opening up the lines to take questions, because I find this conversation very, very interesting. And I think the more questions we would ask or make recommendations, Rutendo would be able, as smart and intelligent that he is, he will pick it from any angle. So guys, get ready. After the break, we're going to take your questions.
Watching the Pan-African Daily TV with Dr. Susan Tata. The Africa we want: unity, consciousness, our culture, our spirituality, our history. One Africa for Africans worldwide. Motherland's calling its diaspora home.
Good. So we are back. Rutendo, I know you must have cut a break, a little bit of breath, and yeah, we want to start. We're opening up the lines, ladies. You can call in. I already saw people that were asking, can we start calling now? Yes, you can call. When you call, please make the questions very short, because I know there are going to be a lot of calls coming in now. We want to explore every opportunity of the intelligence that we still have among us. We have to drain, and we have to start thinking, because I think, like he said, a point that I truly, really appreciate, the point that, you know, all right, we'll get back to that after the call. Hello? Yeah.
Good evening, Dr. Susan.
Yes, good evening.
My name is Stephen. I'm calling from UK.
All right, Steve.
I'd like First, I'd like to make a few suggestions, if I'd be so bold.
Okay.
With relation to our continental function, we need a collective security situation because there are 55 countries. If each country provides 2 million soldiers, that means we have 110 million soldiers. Those soldiers should guard against the kind of atrocities that are going on in Rwanda, Uganda, Nigeria, and other areas of Africa where dictatorship is deliberately imprisoning what should be a free people. Most of the countries around the world are governed by something called the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta says that nothing, no political machinery should ever be used against the people, and that the people have the right of power and will to determine their own freedom without any form of imprisonment or restriction. Okay. Point 3. It's necessary for us to look at the situation and see that for the fact of soldiers should not just be man or woman, they should be man and woman. Why? Because a woman's logic and reasoning is very different to a man's. The man is usually the one, the aggressor, where when it's necessary, where there is no alternative but to fight, he should take lead. The woman is a diplomat, which is constantly in consideration of the fact of her children, or the fact that she will one day aspire to bear them. So she's conscious that she doesn't want to eradicate them, unlike the thinking of a man when he's been greedy. Okay, that's point 4. I think it's necessary for our people, the nation, the general public, to recognize that they have power. They don't have to wait to be given power. They actually have it. They own it. That's what the Magna Carta is about. So what is necessary for the people to do is to have discussions among themselves, determine what is necessary for them to benefit, to improve their local standing, so that when time comes, they have enough food, clothing, and shelter. To be determined how the process will work, that's where the governance of administration comes in, and supposedly the fact of the political party. 5. The OAU-UN, they are supposed to be there to defend the people, not just the people of a particular country or location. All people. They're supposed to be the peacekeepers on the land, but they are keeping quiet while dictators murder people. I would like to ask why it is that no one, apparently, on the continent is able to say, why are you not doing anything? Or even say, if you don't, we will use our people, our power, people power, to remove you from office and put somebody who is willing to work for the people. Okay. My last question, I have a lot more, but I don't want to take up all the time. My last question is this. Mr. Rutendo was talking on the basis of AI. I have this simple question to ask you. To ask all of us, actually, globally. What happens when AI decide that humans are no longer necessary? Okay, I will take my rest and listen.
Thank you very much. Rutendo, over to you. I think there were more like comments than questions for all of us to reflect on. Rutendo? Rutendo.
So he talked about what Africa needs an intervention force to be able to intervene in people's nations and to remove leaders who supposedly are victimizing their own people. I've got a very big problem with this. I've got a very big problem, and I think we once had a discussion on Facebook where this discussion started, that if Africa is going to be peaceful, we have got to get out of the culture of intervening in other people's nations, interfering in sovereign nations, because the only people that really know what is the problem in a nation are the citizens of the nations themselves. And I know this from experience in Zimbabwe, where just last year, sentiment was created by the media, and the media has got owners, and the owners of the media are very few, and a lot of times they're very Western, or they are the owners of capital. And these media are there to protect the interests of the owners of capital. And media became very quick to condemn Zimbabwe as an abuser of human rights. It was saying this because of the abductions that were supposedly happening in Zimbabwe. And it was being said that the Zimbabwean government is abducting people, raping women, and killing Zimbabweans. And what is ironic is that there was no evidence to prove any of these claims. And in fact, when we got to the end of last year, the opposition party, MDC, the same one that went to the United States and the European Union to call for sanctions on the Zimbabwean people, to collectively punish the Zimbabwean people with deprivation of human rights so that those Zimbabwean people would vote for MDC, are the same people that started fighting and blaming each other for these abductions. There were factions within the MDC that were blaming each other that you did the abductions, and another one would say, I will expose you and tell the world what it is that you did when you did this and that. You understand? So they created a lie. And when we look into history, the First World War was started on a lie. The United States was pulled into the First World War by the sinking of a ship called the Lusitania that was sunk by the British to bring the United States into the war. The First World War, we are told, was because of occupation of lands by the Germans. But when you read Hitler's Mein Kampf, and when you read other books of analysts, it was because Germany had a banking system that was not aligned to the banking system of the Anglo-Saxons that was controlled by the Rothschilds. They had the fastest growing industry, the fastest growing military industry, because their bank was able to do debt allocation that allowed growth of industry faster. That's the same thing with Japan in Second World War. They had a banking system that was controlled by the government that printed money, allocated debt to growth sectors, and was able to grow its economy faster because its debt did not have any interest that had to be given to a usurer or to the Rothschilds. So when you now go into a country with information and intelligence that is acquired from the media, intelligence that is acquired by so-called governments that are able to use their vast intelligence services. So in Africa, you'd have to depend on the French intelligence, you'd have to depend on CIA, you'd have to depend on agencies and espionage agencies that are spying on other countries with technology that your countries do not have in Africa. Because in Africa, we don't have technology to eavesdrop in people's countries. In Africa, we can never really know what's really happening in Uganda because we can't send our spies into Uganda to spy. So how do we create a picture of what is happening in Uganda? People developed a picture that Mnangagwa's government is murdering Zimbabweans when it wasn't true. Julius Malema began to be used by his handlers in South Africa to condemn Zimbabwe and to try and get a spontaneous uprising of Zimbabweans calling for human rights in their nation. But what Julius Malema didn't have as well is, even though he wanted to destabilize, he didn't know the psychology of Zimbabweans. He didn't know the appetite of Zimbabweans because his information was not enough to know whether he can incite Zimbabweans to undertake a spontaneous uprising. 70% of Zimbabweans stay in villages. Those people have got land. Those people are being given inputs to farm. Those people are being supported by the government. They've got no appetite to spontaneously uprise against the government because they've got so much to lose. But when you're outside, you don't know that. Even the American government that is trying to destabilize Zimbabwe doesn't know that. So we mustn't intervene in other people's countries. You then talked about the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta is a theory. It is a theory that has never been put in practice anywhere on earth because there is nowhere on earth where people govern themselves without the use of force by governments. Law enforcement exists to enforce the laws that usually people will not adhere to if there is no force. There's armies in each and every country to support law enforcement to quell threats, foreign and domestic. So the Magna Carta is a theory. And when you look at the countries that purport to uphold democracy, the United States of America, it's a colonizer. It is a country that belongs to Indians colonized by Anglo-Saxons. And so they have to have a police force, they have to have soldiers to oppress and put down the natives of that land for them not to want their land back. They have to oppress rebellion by American Indians in places like Flint.
Hold on. No, Rutendo, go ahead. I was just talking to the caller to hold on.
Right. So they talk about these Magna Cartas. They write these theories, but they themselves in America and Europe have built societies in which the people that really rule or govern the people are not known and they're not elected by the people. We just saw right now with Trump, who is complaining that the elections were rigged. I don't know whether they were rigged, but let's say Trump is right. It basically means that there's somebody behind the scenes who determines who gets power in America, and that person with the power to choose leadership is a person who's not elected by the people. And if that person can choose leadership, then who is making policy in America? Is it the person that the Americans are electing, or is it the person behind the scenes that is not elected? And then those people are the same people that tell our youth leaders that African leaders have stayed for too long. But who do they know who's at the back governing America, stopping Trump from ascending to power? Do they know who's at the back who made sure that they gave the instruction and directive for American President Kennedy to be killed? They don't know. So this Magna Carta and theories that come with Europeans are impractical because they don't practice them themselves. America is a colony, so it's a crime against humanity. It is not a democracy, but we have been made and convinced to believe that America is a democracy and they should police human rights when it's a barbaric state of colonizers and an apartheid state, the biggest apartheid state and the longest standing apartheid state of all time that used slave labor to build itself and never paid reparation. We come from there and says soldiers should be men and women because women have got traits that men do not have. In the world of the past, maybe, but the women of today and the men of today are the same. They have the same aspirations. They're all greedy. They're all about getting as much as possible. They're all about consuming as much as possible. So the women themselves are giving birth to sons that create these men that everybody wants to disassociate. These greedy men, these ever-fighting men, these heartless men, these blood-sucking men are coming from the wombs and the laps of women that raised them into these blood-suckers because the mother needs support from a son. She wants an expensive car, expensive house. So we are no longer able to build a society of men and women that have got those sexual traits that were initially created by the Creator unless we go backwards. When you understand that 1/3 of the world was colonized by a country that was run by a queen, when you understand that the world today is still said to be run by what is called the dark nobility, and in that dark nobility is one of the most powerful women in the world who has created so much death, genocide, and deprivation, you ask yourself if women still have the qualities to be able to raise, to be negotiators, to be ambassadors. When we talk about women, we associate women with the stepmother, the most cruel and the most negative thing that could happen to a child is to be adopted by a stepmother. The most terrible thing that can ever happen to a human being is to be bewitched at night by a witch. Those are women. Now, my question is, in a society of so much evil, where the woman is the witch, the woman is the stepmother, the man is the soldier and the rapist, What kind of a world are we going to build? And can these people build a better society? So I don't believe that armies and soldiers are the best way to do things. And then he then goes on to say that, why is the UN not stepping in? Why is the UN not interfering with what's happening in nations? And why is the AU not doing the same thing? Because there are codes, there are charters. The UN Charter is clear that nations must not interfere in the sovereign affairs of other nations unless the citizens of that country undertake a process of petitioning these institutions by, for instance, putting in complaints to the Human Rights Council, putting in complaints to the General Assembly itself, petitioning countries in the General Assembly for a body called the UN Human Rights Council to go with its 43 or 46 nations to investigate. They have got the apparatus in different nations, multilateral body that does away with bias, that will go into these countries and investigate if something is going wrong. It is those very same bodies that we are saying even countries like Zimbabwe that are under sanctions must approach those bodies to begin to investigate the human rights violations that are happening in Zimbabwe because of the sanctions. And if there are people who say the Zimbabwean government abuses human rights, they must also go to the same board. So the UN cannot interfere until citizens take steps to exhaust the processes and legal processes in their nations. They get out of their nation, they go to the AU, they go to SADC, exhaust those channels, and from there they petition the UN Human Rights Council, and if that doesn't work, they petition separate nations within the UN General Assembly, and they can even petition the Security Council itself. So we have to learn to organize ourselves, because that's what South Africans did to make sure that apartheid was discerned as a crime against humanity, and a law created for it in the Rome Statute and also in the UN. South Africans themselves had to organize themselves and start petitioning institutions like the UN, the Human Rights Council, the Security Council, the General Assembly. They went from there, they began to lobby in separate countries. They began to have shows, they began to have songs, singing, acting sessions where they were spreading their message. And that is what we need to do today. And I've even said to some people that South Africa has maintained apartheid. Apartheid still exists today. Only difference is that the freedom fighters that were fighting for freedom have joined the apartheid colonizer and are enjoying the benefits. They've got shares in loot companies. They've got shares in companies that were built by crimes against humanity. And now they've joined hands with the colonizer to exploit their own people. And I've said to South Africans, it's time that you go back to the UN to say that you created a covenant against the crime of apartheid. Apartheid continues. You need to lobby these institutions again to again start fighting apartheid in South Africa with the blackface. In Zimbabwe, they say that there was something called Gukuraundi, where they say that Ndebele people were massacred by the Zimbabwean. And we've said that if Ndebele people really know that their people were massacred, they should go and petition the UN Human Rights Council for the same. But the problem with their claim is that there are already 6 international reports that say that there was no genocide or massacre of Ndebele people, but there was a civil war in which civilians became the logistics and the support system of tribal terrorists, and that caused the civilian rights that were protecting these people to go away, according to the Geneva Convention that says if you're a civilian and you begin to harbor combatants, you begin to harbor their weapons, you begin to use weapons. If you're a hospital and you begin to harbor the weapons of combatants, your protections according to the Geneva Convention as a civilian and a non-combatant fall away, and you become a legitimate military target. Factories that manufacture anything that helps the war effort or helps one side over the other become legitimate targets for military intervention. That's what is said to have happened during that period. But again, if they are so convinced that something happened and they have the evidence, they must approach these institutions. So Africans must approach these institutions, and then these multilateral institutions will evaluate what it is that is happening in these countries. And they have got mechanisms that are stipulated in the UN Charter on how disputes and such kind of contraventions of human rights are dealt with by these institutions. They can, number one, deal with it by taking it to a court or establishing tribunals. When a nation is found guilty, it will be warned and asked to desist. If that nation continues to do what it does, a resolution can be reached, and then there's a vote to either use violence or non-violence, which is sanctions or a military intervention. The UN prefers to use non-violent means, which is sanctions. Their sanctions are regulated. That number one, impact assessment must be done in the country to see whether civilians are going to suffer. Number two, they must be able to target their sanctions on institutions that do not affect human rights enjoyment by the civilians. And once their sanctions have been imposed, every year they must assess the impact of these sanctions and see that they're not affecting the civilians. And if they're affecting civilians, they must remedy the problems that have been caused to civilians so that civilians enjoy their human rights. Hence, they don't want nations to impose unilateral sanctions, because those unilateral sanctions are not determined by a multilateral body of different nations that are not racially biased and that do not enjoy the same ideology to allow for fairness and non-racism. And then he asked, AI, what happens when AI decides that human beings are no longer relevant? And I think that's the point I was bringing earlier. To say extinction of humanity can be brought about by these technological advances being brought to us by this Western virus of a culture that has created AI. And with AI learning from history, AI will get to know very quickly that the biggest problem on earth is human beings. That's the first thing that AI is going to learn. AI is also going to learn that the only danger to it is the person that can switch off the switch. And that person that can switch off the switch is a human being. So the AI is going to get to know quickly that the human being is a domineering force that will eventually clash with AI. So it will determine that human beings are its biggest threat. And I mean, it's obvious to know what AI should do if humanity is its biggest threat.
Wow. Hey, Rutendo, we miss you so much. I told you even before, but I'm just telling you again, like, you know, among those guests, when you have them, you can relax. Susan can go make coffee, drink. I can be cooking fufu now while Rutendo is just doing the work. I mean, it's so brilliant and super interesting for us to know that the capacity is not our problem, the resources is not our problem, and to get such quality high-end perspective and lectures here for us to look not just always like, oh, you know, we have to do this, we have to do, but also to look at ourselves critically and say, are we really ready? Are we getting there? It was a wonderful show. I mean, I want to apologize for those that have been calling and I can't pick the call. Please use our WhatsApp. We don't pick direct calls. Use WhatsApp and we're going to get, we will pick your call. And just going through a little bit, I see Perry, you're saying that, wow, this guy is so brilliant. I know is also supporting and saying you guys should click and like. But what I find in the chat that was so interesting is this one that said, Chichi said, wait, Chichi said, don't worry, these Muzongo platforms that we're using, they steal our likes. So Dr. Susan, don't worry, we're liking it, but you're just not seeing it. Rutendo, very interesting audience here. You know, my audience is just part of the show. I mean, they comment, they chat. I know you have it in front of you, even though, you know, you're doing your presentation and you're so straight. But it's just interesting, the global team on the Pan-African Daily TV. I mean, the audience, the viewers, the commentators, the sharers, you know, and those who just make jokes like Kofi is saying, our Queen Efua is not putting up lipsticks today. You can imagine, like Rutendo, you want to ask, like, what is that topic got to do with it? But this is exactly the point you're talking about, why this AI would fail in any case. Because look at the way we're discussing, look at the way we're intercommunicating, look at the personal communication among us. You're there saying something, watch your chat, but they pick everything that you're saying. And another comment that really was funny was Kofi said, as you're seeing Rutendo sitting there, he's a millionaire. So please go on and give him the money. But I want to encourage you, please like the show and donate to us, to our work. I mean, we are really doing an incredible job. Please support us. And you know what? You had been asking why Rutendo is not coming on the show, and I told you Rutendo is not coming because you hear this big mouth that he's making here. Before you know, they're gonna break his phone and his computer. So he needs always to be on a permanent 3 phones and 3 computers, because before you know it, the bots are in, and it's been on the run all the time. So I'm gonna pick this other call. It's quite interesting. Please, all those that are calling from Austria, I see your calls, but please use the WhatsApp and I'll get it. Hello?
Hey, how you doing?
Yes.
Oh, okay, fine. My sister, I'm just asking you guys for like a favor in the program for you all to invite Professor Lumumba and Julius Malema one day. Can get the record straight.
The Professor Lumumba is always here. Julius, yes, we're working on that. We've been sending invitations. I think they're busy. Of course, we're gonna get them. Even Bobby Wine. These are our people, and I don't want to think that it's we're reaching out to them. If you get a way to help us with that, we appreciate. I can't get you. Hello.
I think you need to be honest.
Yeah.
I think you need to be honest with him.
Hello.
Hello. Rutendo, hold on. Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Yes.
Yes, I've been calling for me to give my contribution on the show, but it wasn't going through.
No, what I wanted, please, can you use the WhatsApp? Use the WhatsApp. That's what we're getting. It doesn't go through because I think you kind of use Signal or what, and the system doesn't accept it. Go through WhatsApp, it will be okay. That's why you just cut in the other brother that was calling, okay? Use the WhatsApp.
Okay.
It's the same number, but call using WhatsApp. Thank you. Go ahead, Rutendo. I'm sorry for the brother that called because she called on. Okay, she's still on. Hello.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, you put me on hold. Okay.
No, I didn't put you on hold. She was calling on a direct call, and I keep saying, please, when you're calling, use the WhatsApp, because when you call directly, you're gonna put every other person on a hold. All right. Go ahead, brother.
I'm just asking a favor for these people are asking for. You need them.
Okay.
Genius and Bobby Wine.
All of them, they have our invitations. They have our invitations and they get back to us. We're bringing them to the show. That's why we're here. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you too. Thank you for your contribution.
I'm going to enjoy my brother. I hope my brother is so eloquent. Thank you. I love it. I love you guys.
All right. We love you too for calling. And please, it's not about eloquence. It's about us learning and doing the right thing. Rutendo? All right. Thank you, bro. Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Yeah, I was saying, I think you need to be honest with him. The truth of the matter is that we've heard many people, particularly on Pan-African forums, complaining that they invite people like Julius and he doesn't come. And because a lot of people say that he charges to appear on platforms. And so I think those Pan-Africanists need to be honest and tell people that we are being charged and we don't have the money that is required to get some of these people onto the platforms. And it's important to give people that kind of information so that people begin to understand who their leaders are. People begin to understand who these people that they want to speak to them are. Because if Professor Lumumba can come here for free, but Julius must charge to come here, or I'm not saying he charges, but this is what we've heard, Bobby Wine, if he's charging to come here and doesn't want to speak to the youth, they don't want to speak to the youth for free, it's very important for us to get our youth to start questioning, who are these leaders who behave like the colonialists, who exploit?
Rutendo, please, let me pick up this Queen's call. I think she's wanting to be on the show. Hello?
Yes, hello.
Yes, my dear. I'm so sorry. Go ahead. How are you doing, Queen?
I'm doing very well, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to participate in this program.
Yes.
And I'm really excited to listen to this young guy from Zimbabwe. I really love Zimbabwe for the level of intelligence I've seen they exhibit, because I've interacted with a couple of Zimbabweans. I'm actually from Liberia, but I school in Ghana, so I'm one of those persons who really believe in Africa unity. So I really love Zimbabwe, and I love the way he said a lot of intelligent stuff when it comes to Western civilization and how it diminishes nature. And it's true in almost all of the society they built over time. They have built society and destroyed them like twice before our own eyes. Like the World War I, the World War II, those were all Western powers fighting for resources. So there is a possibility that World War III may come again. And I noticed for us on the continent, we've always been very relaxed and always so close to nature. But unfortunately, the contemporary African do not understand how our Asian society have managed to go that far. We sometimes feel that we are so intelligent than the natives, and we are getting some things wrong.
Yes.
So there are a lot of good things that we can learn from the other side, but there is also a need to localize those ideas that will help us lead to sustainable development, which our forefathers have done in years. That's how they've been able to maintain the rivers, the creeks, their environment, everything has been intact for a couple of years. When I go to my maternal village, I see nature and I see people who have lived over there for years. They have not damaged their environment, and they've been able to keep human relations, and they've been able to keep their intelligence. You can discuss with an old man who was born maybe around 1920 or 1930. He will be able to discuss with you intelligently for a longer period as compared to our current generation.
Correct.
So that tells you there is a lot of deficits in the human intelligence of the contemporary Africans, and you see there are a lot of gaps in how we analyze things, the strategies we use, and there are a lot of things that we will work on. Because for one fact, if you look at Africa, when we started fighting for independence, after independence, there were a lot of coup d'etat that people tried to take over country, and we still have that struggle today. Because why? Common sense. People from different tribal groups who couldn't coexist were forced to live in the same area by European powers that brought them there. And that led to a whole lot of confusion, because these people were strangers to each other. They never understood each other's culture, and they started to rebel against each other. And then, so I can tell one for a fact, it's good that we learn on development and growth within the continent. That can be done without Western direct copy of Western civilization or ideas, because there will always be a struggle for resources, and that's the byproduct of capitalism. People can say capitalism is good, but it is not good till when you have scarce resources. It seems about the fittest. I'm just true. I hope that people can start reading this thing, because our children to come will not be here. Things might go really bad, and some of the decisions that we're supposed to make today to protect them, it will be sad that we will see them go that path. So thank you guys once more for this conversation.
Wow, I'd love to have you as guests on the show, Queen. I mean, you just.
No, I would love to. I would gracefully love to share my ideas.
Okay, okay.
Every day and night.
I would connect with you.
Things that I would go through.
All right,
Yeah.
I will connect to you. Thank you very much. I mean, it's a pleasure, particularly when we hear conscious women that get it straight. Rutendo, that's a win. That's a very big win. Hello?
Absolutely.
Hold on. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Yes. Good evening. You're live. Go ahead. Where are you calling from? What is your contribution?
I'm calling from Kenya.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello, I'm hearing you. Oh, I think the connection is bad. But calling from Kenya at this time, wow, I think it's almost midnight in Kenya now, or even past midnight. Good. Rutendo, how do you feel?
Yeah, no, that was a brilliant contribution from the lady there. I like the way she talks about African unity, and she talks about the issue we've spoken about, the destructiveness of European culture. She talks about how we might have a World War III because of the fight for resources. And if we do have a World War III, it's going to be a nuclear holocaust, mutual assured destruction. That is not going to be good for us. African development has always been sustainable. And unfortunately, Western education and Westernization has made us feel like African culture was very backward. But I would just like to remind everybody that when Europeans got to Africa and they brought all their gadgets and everything, they persuaded Africans to come and work in their mines and leave their land. Most Africans refused. They were not interested. They were not interested in wearing pants. They were not interested in having a metal gun. They were not interested in these gold coins that these Europeans had, because these Africans felt that they had everything that they needed with their land, their cows, and the resources that they used to trade. And so the European had to go on an endeavor to primitively accumulate and to take these people's properties and to recreate capitalism as it was created in Europe by taking away factors of production from people so that they're forced to go to work in the mines and the farms. So our people were happy with their way of living, and we can be happy with that way of living, and we can create through our knowledge whatever we need to be able to survive. And then she talks about Africans maintained their environment, and I want to reiterate this point. Many people point to us and say, European technology is the best, that's why you're all using. And I always say to people, never forget that the European left Europe looking for new lands because they polluted Europe. They'd eaten every animal in Europe. They'd eaten even hyenas in Europe. And I know you've heard this before, Annie, but we must reiterate it for our young scholars to understand. They had filthied the air, they had polluted the air, they polluted the water, they polluted the soil to an extent that Europe was now creating sickness. They depleted all their gold, all their coal, all their iron and chrome. And now Europeans had to invade other Europeans in order to have these resources. This is what caused the Great Wars. It caused the Napoleonic Wars, caused the 30-year wars in Germany. It caused the Punic Wars. All the wars you've ever heard in Europe were caused by this fight for resources. And it killed over 400 million people fighting for resources in Europe. So the Pope realized that the European civilization is going to destroy itself. So in 1454, he gave a decree that was made law by European nations, what they call international law today, or what is sometimes referred to as the law of nations. And the Pope said, go to lands that have got non-Christians, go to lands that have got non-Europeans, and colonize those lands. The Pope was informed enough to understand that they were clean lands, lands where animals were not decimated, lands where water was clean, land was clean, land was fertile. Europeans had destroyed the fertility of their land by putting chemicals and over-farming. And that's why they came to Africa. That's why after 1454, after the discovery doctrine and discovery law, they went across the world to take people's land, resources, and assets. And when they got to our countries, they began to repeat the same cycle of polluting, of eating every animal. They got here, they saw so many elephants, they were so excited. They started shooting them and piling tusks from ground all the way to the top. People like Vanderbilt got rich because of the pelts of the animals, the pelts of the buffalo that they were killing in America. Livingston, and a lot of hunters that became millionaires, and those millionaire legacies have been left to white people in European countries today from destroying African nature. So, if their technology was so good, why couldn't they make Europe livable? Because Africa was livable, we didn't want to go anywhere. We didn't look for new lands because we were comfortable. Why couldn't they make Europe comfortable? Because their technology does not make life comfortable. Their technology is destructive. The concept of capitalism, where they take everything from everybody for only a few people to have, so that everybody else can become their slave, is not a system in which anybody can flourish. And so that's why they came here, and they replicated the same system. And so the last point she talked about was old generation is very intelligent. You can have long conversations and learn a lot from them. That is because our education system has not made us wiser. It has made us more stupid. It has put us in a box. It has taught us how to think. So we can no longer think out of the box. And so that's why I have so many enemies. Because when people listen to me speaking, I speak against everything that was taught in school. When people listen to me speaking, they assume that I haven't been to school. I have to be uneducated to say the things that I'm saying, because I am not speaking what comes from the textbook. That's the problem with school, is it teaches us to think like the textbook. And like I said to you, because we're taught to think like the textbook, we are told that we have to be economists. We have to economize African resources and resources of countries that have got abundant resources. We must economize those resources. And to economize them, we must put them in the hands of Europeans who will manage them for us. Economics taught us that gold is not important. Paper money is important. Economics taught us that iron is not important for you as an African. You don't know how to use it. So you must get papers from Europe to buy expensive shoes, to buy Louis Vuitton, to buy a 40,000 Rand shoes, and then give them your gold. That is why you see that there are governments on the African continent that have accepted positions as directors in companies of looters, companies of charter companies, companies of apartheid companies, companies of colonial companies, to be directors so that they receive paper money while those companies take the vast resources from the country. That's why you see that when you come to South Africa, you're going to visit the Great Hole in Kimberley. You're going to celebrate a hole that was dug in the ground, the deepest hole where the most amount of diamonds were extracted. It's a tourist attraction to brag about how South Africans lost their diamonds to the world. We talk about the deepest gold mine in South Africa. It's 5 kilometers underground. And we brag about that. Yet we forget that $2 trillion of gold was taken out of those mines, and $5 trillion of gold taken out of South Africa, which does not have a sovereign wealth fund. That is nothing to celebrate, but our education system tells us that we must celebrate a tourist site instead of crying about the gold that has been stolen from the country and that has been sent through to Britain. So we are no longer able to think and reason because education has put us in a box of stupidity that we no longer can reason. We believe that foreign investment that comes to control our resources and make us slaves in our own countries is development. Instead of us allowing our people to take 100 years to learn how to use their own resources and how to use their own land until they can use their own land for the benefit of our children. You look at a country like Nigeria, rich in oil, they're giving their oil to foreigners. A few people are becoming billionaires in Nigeria, and they continue to maintain that status quo because they can have a private jet to fly to Paris and have ice cream in the afternoon and come back to Nigeria. We have situations right now in Zimbabwe. They have discovered oil in the Muzarabani Basin. We have got an Australian company of a man called Maximilian that has controlled that concession of oil ever since colonialism, and we've done nothing about it till this day. And we, the Zimbabweans, can't come together. Maximilian has put raised $4 million on the Australian Stock Exchange to explore. We Zimbabweans, driving Bentleys, driving Bugattis, driving Ferraris, driving Lamborghinis, were unable to come up with $4 million as a group of people to explore our own oil. These are the stupidities of education that taught Africans to specialize in poverty, while Europeans specialize in making money.
Correct.
And then I think finally, let me see, capitalism is bad. And then you talked about women. We do need women like this lady, women that will take us back to basics, women that don't demand Louis Vuitton handbags, but women that demand men that are productive, women that do not demand their men to do anything for money, including doing abominable things to make money, but women who say we want men with integrity, and integrity means more than spending money.
Wow. Where do we find such men, Rutendo?
You find those men in men like me who will tell Pfizer to F off, refuse their money for me to make their ads, because I'm willing to die until I learn how to make money correctly, rather than making money from the exploitation of my people. Absolutely. I'm not scared of hunger. You want a man who's not afraid of hunger. I'm not afraid of hunger. I'm not afraid to be starved. Money is never going to be used against me to make decisions that I don't want to make.
That's the real man, not a boy.
Yes.
The man, not the men that look after cars and clothes, but the men that are of integrity and value. That is the point. Yes, I hope we're going to get them. We have them, and we have women also, like our sister. Of course, we are really able, all of us, be as our men or our women, wages enough for us. Hello? Hello?
Hello. Good evening, my dear sister.
Good evening, Papa Kofi.
You look so beautiful.
Thank you. Each comment that anyone will make here, I need a donation there. $50.
Yes.
$100, $1,000. I've never had a generous giver of these Lamborghinis that you're talking about that would just give us 100,000 here, but they are coming. Go ahead, Pakofi. Yes.
You must know that no one in this world can even touch you. You know why? Because our ancestors, those who them tell us that our ancestors are wicked, our ancestors are stupid, our ancestors are rubbish, we believe in our ancestors. So our ancestors, they will protect you no matter how it is. Nobody would, even, you will not get even this kind of rubbish sickness where it's going to move around, it's moving around. They will protect you. They will protect you. They will protect Miss Arikana. They will protect even Efwatata. And Patrick Kulumba and Dorewan, how do you call it?
And you.
Yeah, anyway. So, I love the way you speak everything what you're talking about. But I have a little bit misunderstanding about what we're talking about yesterday. And I really want your opinion about what we're talking about yesterday. Against alone for this Fulani peoples, how the way they say the Fulani peoples are misbehaving in Africa and all those stuff. I think that is not the right way, because we are all in Africa. We need our unit. So we can't say that the descendants must become home, and those are home. We say that no, they are not here. They are not come from Nigeria, from Senegal. So they know God, know land. So we're not supposed to stay here, or not supposed to stay other side. So I really want to know your opinion about this, because I know that you will make we get clear, understand for our African unity. Because someone like you should be inside of this African. Where you are, they said it is African Union.
No, Papa Kofi. If he gets there, he gets corrupt. Let him just stay where he is. Rutendo is very okay where he is.
Right.
Not everybody has to go to that house. That house until we.
So that they can like what is wrong. Okay, anyway. So Rutendo, I leave this for you. Try to enlighten me for what I'm trying to telling you. Ask for this.
Yes, he got it. Okay, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Papa Kofi. Rutendo, yesterday we had a discussion on the uprisings in Nigeria between the Yoruba and the Fulanis. I know maybe, no media will say it except you come to the Pan-African Daily. So I don't know if you have an idea but the issue was like these Fulanis that have been, they've been causing a lot of problems with their cattle. When they relocate to other lands, they,
I do. And from what I understand is that the Fulani have not been a problem only in Nigeria, but they've been throughout the Sahel region and the West African region. They migrate from area to area. And when they sometimes get into an area, people don't want them to graze their cattle. And so they fight with these people. My only problem is this. We need to be able to make a distinction between African people and people who are religious fanatics carrying the religions of non-African people.
Correct.
And so in that region, one of the biggest problems, especially with the Fulani, is that they are Muslim and they are driven by their Muslim ideology much more than they're driven by their African identity. And that Muslim ideology makes them believe that they have got a God-ordained gift to spread Islam, and where they cannot spread Islam, and they need to eliminate other people. They also believe that they've got a God-ordained right to inherit and to take what it is that they want because the land was put forth for them by Allah. That is one of the biggest problems that I've got. So we are not talking about African people. We're talking about African people with a spirituality that is un-African. And if you understand, human beings are not the body. They are actually the spirit and the mind living in a body. So if a person is already infected by the religion that comes from from Northeast Africa or the Middle East, and that religion is anti-African, it becomes very difficult to treat that person with an African solution. And that is the problem that you're beginning to see in Nigeria. And it didn't start in Nigeria. In Central Africa, the Fulani tried to do the same thing that they're doing in Nigeria, to kill off people, to change and replace leadership in government and military positions and the police in order to exert power and to be able to achieve their outcomes. And the youth of Central Africa had to come together and start massacring these very same Fulani people. And the Nigerians, as far as I'm concerned, have been very patient. They've been getting killed. Christians are getting killed. Yorubas,
Biafran.
What do we call Igbo people getting killed? And now they're beginning to stand up and they're beginning to say, it's time to fight back. It's unfortunate, but when somebody is a religious fanatic, sometimes it's very difficult to break through to them except by violence. And so I don't know if this solution, if this situation in Nigeria can be dealt with anything else other than violence. And one of the biggest problems is this. The Nigerian situation is beginning to cascade throughout Africa. And a gentleman once said to me, what is happening in Nigeria is going to happen throughout Africa. Because these Fulani and the Muslims of Nigeria are consolidating power. And they're consolidating power to use that power to take over Nigeria. But they don't just want to take over Nigeria, they intend to make the whole of Africa a caliphate for Muslims. And now you're seeing that even in Southern Africa, where we never used to have problems with Muslim fanaticism, we are beginning to have Islamic rebels in Mozambique. But before I get read wrong, I'm not saying that Muslims are a problem. It's religious fanaticism that is a problem. And when a religion encourages people to be fanatics, that is a problem. And I understand that there's moderate Muslims and there's also fanatic Muslims. But there is literature out there that says the moderate Muslim and the fanatical Muslim or the radicalized Muslim are one and the same thing, because the moderate believes in converting people through proselytization or conversion. But when conversion doesn't work, what is the solution next? It is jihad. And so this jihad is what is behind this Fulani problem, from my understanding of the reading of the literature. And having said that, I must also qualify this by saying I could be wrong, because that is what we get from the media and the selective talking to the people that we speak to. Maybe if you're in the ground in Nigeria, it's a different story, but the Yoruba reaction for me says something totally different. And I understand that the Islamic or people that come from the north, they have taken over Nigeria. They're the ones that are governing, they're the ones in the police, they're the ones in the army, and they're using their power to oppress the two other tribes in the south. So I don't know how it can be solved without fighting. I don't know how it can be solved without fighting. So religious fanaticism is a threat to the African continent. And the Igbo people, the Igbo people together with the Yoruba people, they're going to have to find a solution to this. And I don't know if peace is going to be that solution. But I would never encourage war. But I don't know how this can be sorted out. And like I'm saying, our threat right now is the problem coming to Southern Africa. Let me tell you something before I go. So you know that in Southern Africa, we've also got a problem of xenophobia in South Africa. And this xenophobia flares itself up now and again. And it is usually fomented by politicians. Politicians who seem to use this violence to threaten foreigners to know their place, but also to appease their stakeholders. There are people like a gentleman called Ike who is very vocal in denouncing foreigners with the intention of fomenting hatred against these foreigners. Now, South Africa is made up of foreigners of different nationalities. Nigerians are a very big section of South Africa, people from Somalia, and a lot of people from Muslim nations, including these Fulani descendants. And what I have been warning the South African people in terms of scenario planning is, guys, listen, it might be good to undertake xenophobia and you feel that you are showing Africans that anytime we don't want you in our country, we can take you out. But the problem that is in South Africa is that so many people have established themselves in South Africa. People with backgrounds of nationalities and religions that want to take over Africa, who are going to cherish this use of xenophobia as an opportunity to open an opportunity to invade South Africa. These very same people we're talking about that control Nigeria have vast resources, oil wealth. They've already got militia operating to destabilize their own country for power. And it's very simple for the very same people to put vast oil resources into a country like South Africa to arm a faction of their own people to fight back against this xenophobia with the intention of taking over. And South Africans themselves, Black South Africans who don't have an economy, Black South Africans who control less than 7% of the economy, will be no match for those enemies who come from the outside, enemies who not only be coming from Africa, but who will be funded from Saudi Arabia, funded by some of the countries that fund Islamic terrorism, will finance people to destabilize. And the South Africans will have no resources to counter that. While inside South Africa, there are whites who do not mind destabilization of South Africa so that they can at some point call for their own independent state. So I'm saying to Africans and African leaders, people like Julius Malema, that you need to have foresight. If you are going to be leaders in future, if you're going to be youth leaders in future, if they are going to be youth members of the ANC that intend to rule South Africa, they cannot be continued to use, they cannot continue to be used by white people to cause this xenophobia that will eventually breed the seeds of the destabilization of this country by organized peoples who come from lands where they have intention to religiously and spiritually take over places, or organized people, like Nigerians are very organized people, Ghanaians are very organized people, who will one day decide to say, we have settled in South Africa, we've got children in South Africa, and now these South Africans have pushed us to the limit, we are going to fight back, and you have a civil war like you've seen all across Africa. All the civil wars that have started in Africa were started by people who thought that they were so dominant that they could bully others. And they bullied those people until those people don't fear. You don't bully people to fear. You don't bully people into submission. You bully people and you make people start to fight back. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying to the leaders in Southern Africa, be smart. We have got a peaceful region. We don't have the wars that we see in the North and the West. So instead of us starting to plant seeds that can create this problem, bring these Fulani problems to Southern Africa. We've already got Islamists in Mozambique, they can just cross the border. Let's teach the rest of Africa what peace and tranquility is by uniting. I thought I would add that in there because it's very important that our African leaders, if they are going to look at African unity, they cannot do what we're seeing South Africans doing, which is fomenting xenophobia. Mm-hmm. And I'm also saying to Africans, if they continue to foment xenophobia, we must not look at resisting them with violence, but we might have to look at taking them back to international court to say the apartheid system, xenophobia still continues, and maybe we need to deal with South Africa the way we dealt with the apartheid government before we have to look at people that might want to use war as an opportunistic manner to dominate a region that they have always wanted to dominate because of their religious influences and even outside influences from countries that wouldn't mind to destabilize Africa even more.
That was a perfect ending, and you've said it, and you've said it so. I mean, I get this call from Austria. The number ends with 166. Please, I just beg you, call on WhatsApp, but now we're even close, so you need to call tomorrow. I keep saying use WhatsApp. You're calling directly, it doesn't work, it doesn't function. You know, I see your call, but it's not picking up. All right. So, Rutendo, I mean, we're keeping in touch because you have a slot on the Pan-African Daily TV. Now everyone knows that you're active. So there's no way that you're going to tell anything, any reason why you're staying by for all this long. So it is a pleasure to always have you here. This kind of big brains, I'm telling you, they're so scarce to come by. And also this kind of hard talks between us. I like you particularly because that kind of expression in what you just tell us the way it is. Take it or leave it. And as you're saying, you must not be totally correct, but I can guarantee you that you're 90%, 99%, 9999 on track. And we enjoy your conversation. We learn a lot, even though, you know, there are those kind of conversations that we just listen and we chat and play, but we get it so straight and it's serious. So I want to thank you, and we'll be seeing us very soon, Rutendo, as soon as we can again. So you wanna say good night? What?
Yeah, no, I would like to say good night, sis. And I would like to say thank you for having me on the show. And yes, I would like people to understand that I usually can't be on the show because a lot of sabotage is happening with my devices. My Mac crashed in November. That same November, my Apple iPhone was hacked. It was hacked again after I got it fixed in January. So the war that we're fighting is real. There are people that don't want the messages that we are spreading to spread, particularly on the internet. And now they know that people take videos that we make, they make little snippets of critical points, and share them on social media like WhatsApp, and that awakens our people. Many people don't want that. And we are not only going to face attacks through the rigging of our phones, we can face attacks physically. It's not surprising to hear that one day Rutendo doesn't exist because some thieves robbed him and killed him. It's not surprising to hear somebody making false allegations and I can end up in jail, because what we are doing, the fight we are undertaking, is a very dangerous fight. And the biggest danger we're facing is not from the white people, it's from our own people. Correct. The ones that want Louis Vuittons, the ones that want to drive Bentleys, the ones that want to live like the white man at the expense of black resources, the ones that want to topple African governments that are revolutionary. Those men and women are dangerous. Mm-hmm. They will kill you for what it is that they want. But what I want to warn them is, every time you kill an African to live like a white man, you're advancing the new white supremacist system that ultimately will eat you tomorrow. All the black men, the presidents that are sitting on these councils, the presidents that are driving these agendas on the African continent, and the businessmen that think they are part and parcel of the elite, need to understand that the melanin in them and the spirit in them is antithetical to the evil of this world, so they will eventually be eliminated as well once these people have achieved their agenda of proliferating evil and eliminating the African gene that has the capacity to change everything. And before I go, we need to talk about this, sis. The vaccination that is coming. Africans, you must insist that your leaders test that vaccine before you take it. You must insist that your countries look at other means of boosting your immunity, using traditional medicines, and giving you an environment that boosts your immunity and gives you health before you take that vaccine. Any leader that says that you must take that vaccine when we don't know its side effects, when it has not been tested by our own people, which is what Julius Malema did, is a dangerous leader to our people. Any government that is pushing a vaccine without making sure that that vaccine works and that vaccine has no side effects is a danger to its people and the African people. So Africans must get informed. Our own doctors, our own scientists must interrogate this vaccine while we look for African solutions to this problem. Africa is the oldest civilization. It has never needed vaccines to be the oldest civilization. When white men came to Africa, they saw us as the best species to be slaves because we were the healthiest people in the world. We were healthier than the Chinese who they tried to enslave and they died. We were healthier than the Indians who they tried to enslave and they died. We were healthier than white men who they tried to enslave and they died. We didn't have vaccines then. And now we're seeing a video that says vaccines were invented by Nigerians to encourage us to just hold on to that and get vaccinated. Be careful. You must go back to your village and find out from oral tradition if that is true. Find out in our villages from oral tradition how it is that we kept so healthy before the white man got here. Our solution is on the continent and not coming from the enemy. Why would Bill Gates, whose father worked in the organization called Planned Parenthood that looks at reducing African populations, want to give you a vaccine to survive? Why would the white world that has wanted to eliminate us for our resources? They've brought genocide in Congo. They've killed 6 million Congolese people already. Why would they want to give us a vaccine? When did they start loving us? When did they start putting us first in line? They are putting us first in line because they want us to be guinea pigs. The CEO of Pfizer hasn't taken the vaccine, and he says he's not taking the vaccine because he wants to wait in line. Why didn't he wait in line when making millions? Why didn't he wait in line when buying the latest cars? Why didn't he wait in line when buying yachts? Why didn't he give us some of the money that is? Why didn't they return our land? Why didn't they return our resources? Why are their companies not leaving Africa to give us what we need to survive? They want to give us a vaccine. We must be informed. And this message gets people killed, but you must be informed and stop running to the hospital. In some countries, hospitals are taking in people, even if they're sick with a stomach bug, they're throwing them into COVID wards. They're throwing them into COVID wards to be infected. They're using injections that we're hearing nurses making consistent messages that when you come into our hospital, we inject you. When you come into our hospital, we give you oxygen that is mixed with something else that has come with doctors that came from overseas. We must be careful as Africans. And if you don't listen, then maybe let the vaccine come, let it do its job. And after it's done its job, we are left with only Africans with the right minds to take us forward. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, Rutendo. Thank you for your wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for being here. So good night. We see us very soon. I also want to thank you, Angie Silvers. I want to thank Kalena Haufe. I want to thank Dean Host 2000. I want to thank Ibrahim. I want to thank Kofi Chichichi. I want to thank all of you for being here. And yes, like we said, it's about perspective. It's about sharing information and what you know that I don't know, or I know that you don't know. But very important issues I would always remind here, please select the one that you know that you need. Just don't chew what, or don't bite what you can't chew. Take just a little bit of what you can. The video is going to stay here. We produce it. You can share it. You can re-watch it, relax. We just produced it now, and it's going to be there. That's what we do on the Pan-African Daily TV every day, every evening with you guys, producing and putting this content out there for our generation and for those that cannot make it to join us live. I want to thank all of you commenting. And yes, Kofi, I didn't put up a lipstick today. And yeah, you all look beautiful, as I say. I just saw my elder, Elder Robert came in, Elder Robert Hidley. You came in a little bit late, but you said something that I just laughed. You see, this is the one of the show that I listen with one ear and my eyes are here because the comments are so interesting. Robert says, I want to stand on the rooftop, my brother. And I just imagine you on the rooftop sleeping off, and particularly now in snow where it's so freezing. Yeah, I mean, that's what we do on the Pan-African Daily TV. We laugh, we learn, we comment, we make jokes, but we're getting it. Okay, we're getting it. That's why they call us the monkey people, because we're always like distracting, talking, commenting, cracking jokes. But of course, at the end of the day, we get it because we are super intelligent beings. And we get sometimes bored when people already tell us some things that we know. And that's why we tend to act like that. And so I want to thank you, Stephen. You said Angola shut down churches. Who again? Kofi, I keep saying you. Bijou Noir. And I like one thing. There was one comment that I saw that told Coffee, please. Coffee, please. This is a very interesting lecture. Can you just wait with your site? Yeah, tricky here. And I also saw Larry Babot who joined, and he said we should share and keep the spirit going on. Koboko Sars, are you back from vacation? I missed you so much. The moderator. I know you were already on the past shows. I saw you also. And yeah, Perry said, like Sisi Sumtende Chaba was also here. Who again? Yusuf Siddiq, it's been long. I've been checking out. And now you're here. He said, there's no force in religion. No Muslim will force others to be Muslim. So yes, we're going to watch out. Nobody's going to force us to do what we don't. Skimbo said, but who is sponsoring these Fulanese, especially with guns and ammunition, cars, food, and everything? I suspect that there is, an invisible hand in all these actions on the continent. Thank you for that comment, DC. DC said, Rutendo is my favorite African commentators, easy to understand and truly loves his people just like me. Wow. Thank you, DC. All of us love ourselves. Sinbad Chuku said, Rutendo, you got it right. And what we got here again? Al Hadi Ibrahim said, thank you, always the best. Who again was here? Agnes Majola said, so divide and conquer will never end. Only Yah is able to solve this problem. Thank you for your comment. Yes, like we should not keep dividing ourselves. J.E., I'm just like Professor James Small. Every time Pan-African show comes on, I come running to hear what was said this show, and it's very interesting to learn. Thank you so much. I mean, I'm just going through the comments, please stay here a little while. We have a couple of minutes and we're done. I know it, but I want to thank all of you because I mean, we sometimes just focus on on the guests and we forget that all of us are just guests. I see my technician, my expert Tumi Tata already saying, okay, maybe. Ligola said, thank you. God bless Africa. Thank you so very much. Also, and who again said what here that I missed? Stephen, I don't know. I think that was Stephen that caller said, yes, divided we fall. We must keep intact. We must hold on together. Spirit Truth said he is so fine and he is so truthful. Right? I think I was able to just zap through the comments, and please, if I didn't call your name, I didn't see your comment, or I didn't mention you, no offense against that, okay? I've been watching the whole time. And Giddy said, thank you. I see it here, Perry and the others. Wow. So that's it. One more thing tomorrow. Who's coming up? I already told you, you see, we do the weekly structure, like you advise. I got some feedbacks and comments like, oh, Susan, you're just always too African, too flexible. Yes, it's true. Like I'm just 1 minute and they drop the flyers. I want to give a shout out to Naisha. Naisha is doing a very incredible job, putting out those things and sharing the flyers there. And I get the credit. Like people always like, oh, thank you, you're doing a good job. But it's a whole lot of team. The ones that are sharing, the ones that are designing, and Patrick Kasrim on the continent with the social media stuff here. We are just so incredible, powerful people. So please continue to support us and donate. If you can donate, share the link to other people that would do it. We need funds. We need funds. We're not even one step into it. And we need to get equipment. We need to, pay internet and all this stuff. It's hard. It's getting harder every day. If we cannot keep Pan-African Daily TV, I mean, I don't know what we can even start thinking. Yeah. I mean, we are volunteering, all of us. So we just thank you if you do a little gesture each time that you're here. And I thank those that have always been doing it. That's very good. It's going to help us keep this program each time that we are here. We are here. So yeah, tomorrow Kojo Bentil is coming on live from Ghana, and he's going to crack us so hard. And you see the conversations is really going to the point that Professor James Smalls and Dr. Obachaka, advisors, we need to start going back. And it's exactly what Rutendo was saying today. What if we just shut the blind and say, foreign partners and all that, you know what, give us time to fix that thing. Let us fix a thing. And then when we get to that stage, then we can negotiate together. So, but you see, we're doing it in a very perfect manner. Our education, our information, our comments, and everything that we're doing here, we're just going back. And you see the way we begin to act, we become more free, we're more simple, we're more comfortable with the situation because we know actually where we're going to. So I really thank all, yes, our expert. Concerning the question that the brother asked, why are we not bringing these other people? Yes, I mean, we also need to know them. Rutendo has been throwing a lot out there on this young leadership. I want to advise you, don't take it personal. And I know they don't take it personal. Rutendo is that kind of an outspoken like Joshua. They will just tell you the way they think about it. And exactly that's who we are. We're still human, We don't try to be a political or professional or diplomatic and roll our tongues. No, we just say it the way it is. We might be wrong, we might be right, but something is definitely in the pipeline. So yes, I sent out, we are reaching out to them and inviting them, all of them, even our African president, we're calling on them, the EU. We need to have this conversation. That's why we are a daily TV, and our main focus is to have a comfortable conversation, even though there's things that are going to make us feel uncomfortable, but why not? That's the purpose why we see human, and why we should avoid the AI, artificial intelligence. Yes. So thank you so much. We'll meet us same time tomorrow with Kofi Bentil, and we're gonna go back to our spirituality and the science of all we need to know to stay where we are and to take Africa to another height. Good night. We see ourselves tomorrow. Bye-bye.